Welcome to Epic World History. In the annals of history, few events are as pivotal as the fall of Rome. The Vandals, once seen as a barbarian force, forever altered the course of history when they sacked the Eternal City. What followed was the collapse of an empire and the dawn of a new era. From the ashes of Rome, barbarian kingdoms emerged, setting the stage for the medieval world. The year was 455 AD, and Rome, once the center of the world, stood on the precipice of collapse. The Western Roman Empire, already weakened by internal strife, barbarian invasions, and economic decline, faced yet another crisis. A new and unfamiliar threat had appeared on the horizon. The Vandals, led by the ambitious King Genseric. Their sudden arrival would shake the foundations of the ancient city. The Vandals were not the first to invade Rome, but their sack would be one of the most destructive and infamous in history. The story of their rampage across the Eternal City begins in the summer heat, when Rome was already in turmoil, its streets filled with refugees and rumors of impending doom. Genseric, the Vandal king, had long sought to avenge the past wrongs of his people. A master strategist and ruthless ruler, he saw the crumbling Roman Empire as an opportunity to expand his own domain. The Vandals were not just raiders. They were well organized and determined. With a fleet of ships, they crossed the Mediterranean and anchored off the shores of Italy. The city of Rome, already battered by previous invasions, seemed ripe for the taking. Genseric had a clear objective: to strike swiftly and to leave nothing but ashes and ruin in his wake. The city's defenses were ill-prepared for such a devastating assault, and the Roman authorities were powerless to stop him. Rome's citizens, gripped by fear and uncertainty, watched as the Vandals began their approach. It was said that the Vandals, with their vast fleet, first targeted the port city of Ostia before making their way to Rome. The Roman Emperor, Petronius Maximus, tried to negotiate with Genseric, offering him gold and treasures in exchange for peace. But Genseric, known for his cunning, had no intention of settling for mere wealth. He had come to Rome to make a statement, to destroy the heart of the Roman Empire, and to claim his place in history. The Vandals, under Genseric's command, made their entry into Rome on June 2nd, 455. They wasted no time. Unlike previous invaders who had sacked Rome, but spared parts of the city, the Vandals showed no mercy. They swept through the city's gates, plundering and burning everything in their path. Shops, homes, and temples were looted, and priceless treasures were carried away. It is said that the Vandals spared none, not even the ancient monuments that had stood for centuries. The sheer brutality of their attack sent shockwaves through the people of Rome, who had never experienced such utter devastation before. The Roman citizens, already exhausted from years of conflict, tried to flee or take shelter wherever they could. The city's defenders were disorganized, and the Imperial Guard was no match for the disciplined Vandals. Genseric's army, composed of fierce warriors, overwhelmed the Roman forces with ease. As the city burned, the cries of the innocent could be heard echoing through the streets. The Vandals were not just pillaging the wealth of Rome. They were systematically dismantling its very identity. Ancient statues and scrolls were destroyed or carried off, erasing pieces of history that had once been symbols of Roman pride. Amidst the chaos, the fate of the city's most precious relics was sealed. The Vandals, led by Genseric, took particular interest in Rome's Christian treasures. The sacred objects that had been stored in the city's churches and basilicas were seized and taken back to Carthage. One of the most significant and symbolic trophies of the sack was the golden menorah, a sacred Jewish artifact that had been looted from Jerusalem centuries earlier. It would be displayed in Carthage as a symbol of Genseric's triumph, a reminder to the world that Rome's might had been broken by the Vandals. The Roman elite, once proud and powerful, were reduced to beggars. Many of the city's senators and wealthy families had their estates plundered, their wealth stripped away. Rome's once grand palaces were set ablaze, and the luxurious marble columns that had adorned the city's monuments were now reduced to rubble. It was a time of great despair, as even the most powerful Romans realized that their city had been brought to its knees by a force they had underestimated. The Vandals showed no favoritism. They attacked both the powerful and the powerless without mercy. As the sack continued, Rome's residents began to fear for their lives. Those who had not already fled the city hid in the catacombs or sought refuge in churches, hoping that the sacred ground would offer them protection. But the Vandals, knowing no bounds, desecrated even the holiest of sites. The great Christian basilicas, once proud symbols of Rome's conversion to Christianity, were ransacked. The churches were plundered for their gold and silver, and the religious relics they housed were stolen or destroyed. The violence and chaos seemed to know no end. The sack of Rome was not just an act of revenge by the Vandals. It was also a strategic move. Genseric had been watching the decline of the Western Roman Empire for years, and he knew that the fall of Rome would be a blow to the heart of the empire. With the city in ruins, he would send a powerful message to the rest of the world: Rome's days were numbered. The sack would cripple the empire's ability to defend itself and accelerate its eventual collapse. It was not just a victory for the Vandals. It was a sign of the changing tides of history. In the aftermath of the sack, Rome was left in a state of ruin. The streets were filled with the remnants of once great monuments, now nothing more than smoldering ruins. The proud city which had been the capital of the greatest empire the world had ever known, was now a shadow of its former self. Genseric and his Vandals had taken what they wanted and left devastation in their wake. But the Vandals were not done yet. They had set their sights on the rich and powerful lands of North Africa, and their plunder of Rome was just one chapter in their quest for dominance. As the smoke cleared and the fires of destruction began to fade, the remaining Romans slowly began to rebuild. But the damage was irreparable. The prestige of Rome had been shattered, and its people, once proud of their imperial legacy, now faced the daunting reality of life in a world without the protection of a strong central government. The Western Roman Empire, already weakened by political instability, would never recover from the sack. The Vandals had shown that even the mightiest empire could be brought low by a determined enemy. In Carthage, Genseric's triumph was celebrated. The Vandals had not only looted the riches of Rome, but had also solidified their power in the Mediterranean. Genseric's victory over Rome was a powerful symbol of the changing world order. The Vandals, once a nomadic tribe, were now recognized as a dominant force. With the fall of Rome, the balance of power in the Western world shifted, and a new era of barbarian kingdoms began to rise in the wake of the old empire's collapse. Rome's imperial leadership, already weak, was further undermined by the sack. Emperor Petronius Maximus, who had tried and failed to negotiate with the Vandals, was murdered shortly after the sack. His death marked the end of another failed reign in the Western Roman Empire. With no strong leadership to guide the city, the once great empire continued its rapid decline, its borders crumbling under the pressure of barbarian invasions. The sack of Rome by the Vandals was a key moment in the broader fall of the Western Roman Empire. In the years that followed the sack, the Roman Empire would never regain its former glory. The Vandals, meanwhile, established their own kingdom in North Africa, where they would rule for several decades. But their power would eventually wane, just as the Roman empires had. The fall of Rome was part of a larger trend in which the ancient world gave way to new powers and new forms of governance. The Vandals, like the Goths, the Huns, and other barbarian tribes, had taken their place in history as key players in the demise of the Roman world. The memory of the sack of Rome by the Vandals lived on for centuries. To later generations, the destruction of the city symbolized the end of the Roman Empire and the rise of a new, uncertain world. The name Vandalism would forever be associated with senseless destruction, a fitting legacy for the Vandals' brutal conquest. But for the people of Rome, the sack was a bitter reminder that even the mightiest civilizations are vulnerable, and that no empire, no matter how powerful, is immune to the forces of history. Though the Vandals eventually faded into history, their impact on Rome was undeniable. The sack of Rome, one of the most infamous events of the late Roman Empire, marked the final blow to a city that had once ruled the known world. The Vandals had struck at the heart of the empire, and their fire and plunder left scars that would last for centuries. The fall of Rome to the Vandals is a testament to the fragility of empire and the relentless march of history. It reminds us that even the greatest civilizations are not immune to the forces of time and change. For Rome, the sack was a tragic chapter in a long and storied history. But for the Vandals, it was a moment of glory, a time when their power was unquestioned and their rule seemed certain. Yet, even as they basked in their victory, the Vandals knew that their reign, like that of the Romans before them, would eventually come to an end. The winds of history are ever changing, and no empire is ever truly secure. As the centuries passed, the memory of the Vandals' sack of Rome faded into legend. Yet the impact of their actions remained. The fall of Rome, marked by the Vandals' brutal conquest, was a turning point in the history of Europe, signaling the decline of the ancient world and the rise of the medieval period. It was an era defined by new powers and new challenges, a time when the old order was replaced by something entirely different. And though the Vandals themselves would be forgotten by many, their actions would forever echo through the annals of history. Rome's fall to the Vandals was not the end of the story. It was a beginning, the first chapter in a new and turbulent era. The Western Roman Empire, once the ruler of the Mediterranean world, had now been reduced to a collection of broken kingdoms. In the wake of Rome's destruction, barbarian tribes carved out their own territories, establishing new kingdoms that would shape the future of Europe. The Vandals had played their part in the grand narrative of history, but they were just one of many forces that would redefine the European continent for centuries to come. The sack of Rome by the Vandals would forever live on in the collective memory of the ancient world. A city that had once ruled the known world now lay in ruins, its walls and monuments reduced to rubble. But from this devastation would rise a new world, one built by barbarian kingdoms and new ideas. The legacy of the Vandals, though controversial, was part of the larger story of the transformation from the ancient world to the medieval period. Rome's fall marked the dawn of a new era in Europe, and the Vandals played their part in this epic shift.